September 12th, 2016. That seems almost impossible for me to believe. Work session of the New Albany Plain Local School District Board of Education. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and request a roll call, please.
Mr. Newmoff.
Here.
Ms. Kalinowski. Here. Mr. Darrow.
Here.
Mr. McClellan.
Thank you. Here.
President Kohler.
I'm also here. So don't sit down, John. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. So request to approve the agenda, but are there first any additions or changes to the agenda this evening?
No.
No? Okay. Could I have a motion then to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. And if there's no discussion, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Newmoff.
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski. Yes. Mr. Darrow.
Yes.
Mr. McClellan.
Yes.
President Kohler.
Yes. Okay, that takes us right into the meat of our meeting here this evening. And we have really two presentation discussion items tonight. The first is a continuation of the discussion that the board had on our recent retreat. And the second is to have a first reading of a new policy that has to do with support organizations. So, Mr. Sawyers, would you like to lead us off, or would you like me to on the first item?
I can begin and then you can jump in.
Okay.
Good evening, Board of Education members. In your second red packet this evening, I've tried to organize the materials for this discussion related to annual goals for 2016-17 as in a continuation of our conversation from the board retreat that we just held last month. So the first graphic that you see is actually the summary chart at the end of the retreat for the high-level aspiration discussion that the Board of Education was having at the time. And part of that included the aspiration of becoming the best school district, not only in the state of Ohio, but into a certain percentile for a quartile or otherwise, depending on the ranking that you would so select within the nation. But that mirrors the language that was developed for the superintendent's statement of purpose that then led to conversations that are also illustrated. The measurements that would be used are the state report card, evidence of a quality profile being developed for the school district, student mental health and well-being discussions, financial sustainability specifically related to expenditures within the school district, and creating a climate that would become the employer of choice for our certified and classified and administrative staff across the school campus. So that graphic's presented to you to try to reframe the context of the conversation that will lead to the next steps that I hope to be able to connect the dots for you. The next item in your packet is actually the typed version of the other flip chart pieces of paper that illustrate expectations, what New Albany Plain Local School District does well, how the school district can continue to improve, and what constitutes a great team within the context of the conversation that we had within the retreat. Each of your answers that were provided in flip chart format as facilitated by Dr. Lucas are represented. We hope we've transposed them to the best of our ability based upon the handwriting. We made a couple guesses on a couple words. I will be honest and tell you that. So if you see something, it's not purposeful. It was our interpretation of what the actual poster illustrated in the language that we could closely relate. The next piece of your packet is the definitions related specifically to superintendent's statement of purpose to create the culture of accountability that meets the best developmental and academic outcomes for children or students within each student within our school district. So we've given that to you as a point of reference. And then it leads into the work that Mrs. Kohler and I have done since the retreat itself. So you have a couple resource pieces of paper in your packet that will lead to the continuous improvement plan that Mrs. Kohler and I have worked on in preparation for this evening. put context to it, this Thursday, the Ohio Department of Education is anticipated to release the 2016 Ohio School Report Cards. Preliminary information has been shared throughout the summer to the school district. It's changed multiple times, but allegedly, as of last Friday afternoon, the final release, with the exception of the progress metric for value added, was provided to school districts. So I've given to you, and you should have also received it electronically, the staff email that went out this afternoon to explain the release of the report card on Thursday and what the district results are anticipated to be. We will do a public presentation for our entire school community at the board meeting on the 26th after the report card's officially released on Thursday, just to be safe in case something does change that I'm not aware of. But if the state does do something, that will ultimately make sure we're giving the accurate information to our school community. Patrick Galloway and I will also ensure that there's communication that goes out to the families after the release of the report card, so they understand what specifically the information represents. The only piece we do not currently have is the value added component. In the state, it's called progress, to show a year's worth of growth for students, and that allegedly is coming out from the department tomorrow, according to the emails that we've received. I have included within your packet the 2016 district sections of the report card, so that you can see what I have seen since last Friday. And Mrs. Kohler and I used this throughout the weekend to actually create the document that really results in our conversation for this evening. The 2016-17 Continuous Improvement Plan. It's the one that has the yellow highlights on it. It's a single sheet back to back within your packet, and that's going to be the foundation of our conversation for this evening. Beyond that, there's two additional resources that will relate specifically to the benchmark. One is the ACT profile for the school district, and the last one is the May 2016 five-year forecast, to also address one of the benchmarks that's being presented this evening as well. This weekend, and really for the last week and a half, plus or minus, Mrs. Kohler and I have been working to try to take all the information discussed at the board retreat and put it into the context of a continuous improvement plan based upon all the feedback and discussion that was received. We're presenting to you this evening the draft of what we believe to be representative of all the conversations that took place related specifically to the board retreat and the continuous improvement that's expected within the school district. We're going to walk through, and this is draft. Everything is subject to change based upon your continued input. This is the work that we've tried to translate on your behalf to springboard the conversation this evening rather than starting from scratch. So this is our best effort to try to incorporate everyone's ideas that were presented that evening at the retreat into the 2016-17 Continuous Improvement Plan. Do you want to make any comments before we start?
The only thing I can think of to add is that this plan, and it's labeled this way, but it is a 2016-17 plan. So it's a one-year plan. And based on input I have already received from other board members, I think that this, once we get this chunk of the plan completed and we are all on board and agree to it, I think it's one part of actually developing what really should be a five-year plan. We know that we have work to do to achieve the pretty lofty and ambitious goals that we've set for ourselves, and they can't all be accomplished in the first year. So what we've tried to outline for you here is simply the work of this particular school year. And once we agree to the work of this particular school year, what we can do after that point is also talk specifically about what the board's expectations and goals for Mr. Sawyers are going to be for this same period of time. So.
And to add to that and hopefully clarify a little bit, we talked about this during the retreat, that you know, going from where we are today to being the best is a process. It's to do that in 1 year is not a reasonable expectation. We want to set lofty goals that are challenging but achievable on a year-by-year basis. And so the idea that this is a five-year process the simplest way to think of it, depending on where we're starting on individual goals, is we got to make at least 20% progress each year in order to get to 100% outcome at the end of 5 years. So that's I think
Or
that
at least have a rationale for
why it's
not
more
going
or
to-
less than that,
Yep,
right?
I agree.
So, but it's just that idea that in order to go from, we're not at zero, we're actually pretty good, but to go from 0 to 100, you have to move your way along that line. You can't, it's unrealistic in most cases to make it all in one job. Fair enough?
It's very accurate. I think it's a great summation of the conversation that took place at the retreat. So we're going to start with commitment to excellence. And again, wordsmithing, ideas, your thoughts. This is meant to be very participatory. This was Laura and my translation of everything that we captured and all the notes and conversations related to the retreat. So the commitment to excellence on behalf of the school districts of the New Albany Plain Local School District is committed to creating a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. The district aspires to be ranked in the 95th percentile in the state of Ohio, as reported by the Ohio Department of Education by 2021.
The first sentence you'll be quite familiar with. We've been using that particular sentence since our very first retreat, I think, in February of this year. And the second sentence is an attempt to put some sort of a measure in place. How will we know if we've arrived?
What is that 95th percentile? What's the metric around that?
Overall state ranking based upon academic achievement. So there'll be a new component grade that's going to turn into an overall grade. So there's 6 individual component grades on the state report card that's coming out on Thursday. In 2018, there will actually be an overall grade that's issued to the school district as well. And the state actually ranks all of the schools based upon the level of achievement. So there will be a report that comes out on Thursday morning in the form of a spreadsheet that will give us all of the statewide data.
And if there are, what, 650 roughly school districts?
611.
And 11. So we will then, the expectation is that we'll be in the top 30 in that ranking by 2021.
And where are we now?
We don't know because
It's a
the
different
results
measure.
are not out. The measures
Okay.
changed
Yeah.
from last year to this year. We had new tests, different indicators, different performance measures. So we don't have that yet. The composite information in a spreadsheet format won't be released from the department until Thursday.
Do you think that the format we're going to this year is what they'll stay with for a while, or?
In form and function, yes. The benchmarks will likely change. Allegedly, the tests will not. So we've had a different test every year, somehow, some way, for the course of the last 8 years. The benchmark for percentiles for specific levels of student achievement that are required to meet the state level benchmarks are scheduled to change again next year. So if the state board moves forward with that to be enacted, then there's technically a higher standard that's also being enacted across the state next year. That's the one dominant change that's scheduled to occur, beyond other metrics coming online or the aspiration of having overall letter grades by 2018 and having a value-added score or progress score for high school by 2018. So they're going through the phases, but the current structure is supposed to stay the same. The component grades that are being introduced this year are supposed to stay the same.
Are they substantially different this year for this past school year than for prior?
Yes, because there were new tests.
So the prior year doesn't provide any benchmark for us to start with?
But we will have this year's in a couple of days.
Yes, we'll have this year's on Thursday. So again, we're throwing this out there and it can stay in draft format. The number that we ultimately decide to put here, this was the aspiration of becoming the best. So we have to, back to Mr. Darrow's point, show continual progress. The question becomes how much progress each year over the course of the next 5 years to get to where we want to be.
And that'll be determined on the basis of where we start.
Right.
So we'll
And
plug
I
that,
can't tell
bottom
you
line is
what
we'll plug
tonight.
that number in after we see Thursday's
Right.
data. Okay.
And this measure will apply to every school district in Ohio.
Yes.
So we've backed off of using the quality profile, which only applies to select school districts. Is that?
That's part of the conversation. This, as it's written, is out of all 611 in the state of Ohio. We aspire to be in the top 5%.
Are there other elements on here that address the quality profile? Or no? I don't remember.
It was a discussion within communications in the last benchmark, and we'll explain that to figure out what you want to do with it.
Okay.
But if we want to compare ourselves, back to Mr. Newmoff's point, against the schools that specifically publish the quality profile through the Alliance, that's a different group of schools. So once we get the information on Thursday, my recommendation would be we look at both methodologies to determine which one we believe will facilitate the goals of the Board of Education for where we want to be in student achievement within the school district.
We may have discussed this at the last meeting. I couldn't recall. There's nothing that we can think of as a national measure, or is there anything that we could potentially put in the mix as a national measure as a school district?
There's actually something that's part of another benchmark specifically related to the ranking from U.S. News World Report and/or Newsweek for top high schools in the nation. So we've incorporated that into a different benchmark. But no, there's right now nothing, and we've used ACT in a different section specifically related to achievement. But there's nothing at the national level that would be normed that we've come up with that would represent the discussion that you had at the board meeting. And again, this is the start of the conversation. Our goal is to try to continue to get your input and feedback. We recognize that that can continue even after tonight, and we'll invite you to contact Mrs. Kohler or me directly so we can try to incorporate all the information that you can provide. Focus. All employees will be accountable for implementing research-based practices, including a rigorous and aligned curriculum, common assessments, focused instruction, and data-driven decisions to achieve the best academic and developmental outcomes for every student within a fiscally sustainable budget. This incorporates, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but this incorporates the why, the how, and the what discussion that took place at the retreat. And part of it, and we've played with the wording a little bit, but Paul, you'll probably recognize where we put in, including a rigorous and aligned curriculum. Part of the discussion at the retreat was the guaranteed and viable curriculum, that if there's 12 third grade teachers, how am I ensured that my third grader, regardless of which teacher they have as the classroom teacher, has access to the curriculum that will allow him or her the opportunity to prove that he or she's successful within common assessments across the school district. So there's a lot of work behind each part of this, but this introduces the structure of the why, the how, and the what into the school district to have a sustained conversation related to student achievement and what our expectations are for classroom teachers on a daily basis related to pedagogy or the art of teaching. So the art of teaching and the pedagogy belongs to the classroom teacher. The content that's being taught should mirror the standards and the expectations required of the school district. And we measure those regardless of which teacher you have through common assessments. We want to see that kids get exposed to the required curriculum and have an opportunity to demonstrate what he or she knows.
And then does that get aligned to their performance management system? To their reviews?
Oh, I had to connect that. I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Yes, that there's a direct relationship, and Dr. Troyer could speak more in depth about it, but yes, there's a relationship of what we would be seeing, observing daily with the assessment data that would be collected and how it would reflect in their performance review in the teacher evaluation system, and honestly, the principal evaluation system.
So I'm sure the curriculum directors are going to be a big part of this.
Mm-hmm. I will tell you they're a huge part of this. They're part of the reason I restored them.
Yes.
This is the work of the school district. So this is what has to happen to ensure our kids have an opportunity to have access to the rigor of the curriculum that's required and have the ability to demonstrate what he or she knows on a daily basis in order to provide them access to the appropriate curriculum to take them to beyond a year's worth of growth.
And from a big picture standpoint, when Michael and I first started to talk about this, our first draft sounded as if it was specifically related to teachers, but that is not consistent with the definitions that we provided in our original commitment to excellence statement. And so we broadened it out so that it's not just classroom teachers who are involved, it's all employees. And there is not a part of our operations or our classroom instruction that should not be managed through a series of data-driven decisions. So that was an important add to the statement. And the other piece that we felt was really important to include, because it's something that's important to the board, it's important to the community, and it came through loud and clear at our retreat, is that although what we're after are the best academic and developmental outcomes for every student, it all has to be accomplished within a fiscally sustainable budget. So it's that piece of it is adding a parameter that I believe that this board strongly endorses.
Agreed. So just taking a quick step back to the commitment to excellence, I just want to reinforce that the 95th number is something we'll discuss further. Should we put in there, since this is for this school year, that it's a movement from whatever the ranking is, for the previous year to some number that we agreed to for the following year? From to, or do we want this to be more of a broad-based statement that retains at a very high level and keeps it at that high level, that our aspiration is to this here? So that's an open question.
Yeah, I mentioned that too, or I probably didn't communicate it all that well, but I challenged Michael to think about the idea of removing that second statement and putting that in a separate bullet point almost, where that's the ultimate goal is to achieve this level of excellence, and whether it's the 95th percentile in the state of Ohio or whether it's some other benchmark that indicates the level of excellence that we are seeking. It almost seems as if that piece can stand alone and remain consistent from year to year to year, and then we can identify what the specific movement is going to be for
in
each
any given year. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else.
Yeah.
But.
And I can live with either of those. I look at these first two items as really very high-level goals that enable us to align the entire district and the entire community behind these broad goals and aspirations.
Right.
So, keeping them there, I think, makes a lot of sense. Then when I get to the focus statement, I noticed that we say developmental outcomes for each student, as is in our statement of purpose, and on the focus we say every student. Was that a purposeful difference?
I don't feel strongly either way. Interestingly enough, in the first drafts, it said for students, I believe. Right, and then the thought was, okay, well, students is too broad. We're talking about each individual child here. So that's where the every came from, but each.
Well, each is in our statement of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference is we're talking about individuals. When you say every, it's a collective, typically, right? I think that's how
That would be my interpretation as well. The individual versus the collective. I think it's just a conversation.
Yeah, it's a matter of consistency.
It could be a matter of consistency to have each.
Just put each and every. How's that? Because it is about each. It is about every individual child, but it is about the collective whole. I know we're at the 30,000 foot view, but I do think, and Paul brought it up, and I think it is important that we have to come to some agreement on what metrics we're going to use, because being ranked in the 95th percentile in the state of Ohio, and then at the same time wanting to be in the U.S. News and World Report top schools, there's different benchmarks, there's different competing interests. I don't want to be chasing one at the neglect of another, and then people are upset and they say, well, why didn't you get to the 95th percentile in the state? And we say, well, but we're number 5 in the U.S. News and World Report. So we're going to have to make some decisions about
We have to
that.
pick.
We have to pick.
Absolutely.
That's why we're introducing it into the conversation, to go through it in its totality. So you actually come back to that same conclusion and say, you have competing priorities, which priority, which benchmark, which metric.
Right. And then pick. And I don't think we can pick 6 different versions. You can't say 95 here, 10 here, 3 there. I think we have to choose the one that is the best match for what we think is important.
Right.
And have some level of consistency over time, so that the next year,
Right,
it means something.
which we haven't gotten a lot of help with because things have changed so much.
Sure.
But the quality profile is one that I think about immediately, because there's so much in the quality profile that goes beyond the classroom performance that is important to our commitment to excellence and our statement of purpose, the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. So I do think the quality profile has to be something that we pay a lot of attention to. And then the only other thing that that I think there's a couple of things, and I know that I'm kind of maybe diving down a little too early here, but the last line on the focus, fiscally sustainable budget, we're going to have to come to some agreement on what that means, because we can sustain probably at any level. But the question is, what does this community want, and what is it willing to invest in to be the best? And that's a discussion I think is going to be ongoing. But that's I'd like for us to. I don't like that line, because I think there's just so much ambiguity about it. We're gonna have to clean that up, I think.
We'll throw another thought out there that I don't want to derail this process, but this has been a good process, this board working together on the future with the new superintendent. I noticed that our missions has disappeared from our agenda as the existing school missions statement. In effect, this is what we're setting up, vision and mission for the district in the context of a 2016-17 performance plan, but we also have 2021 goals out there. So it may be a concurrent thing, but I would think that our mission as a district is going to align pretty closely with whatever we end up agreeing on as this commitment to excellence or vision or aspirational statement we're making. So I might propose that we consider doing this in a concurrent process. I just want to clarify, I didn't understand the point, Laura, earlier. I was thinking I was the only one who didn't get it, and it was my fault on combining these two. Was that the suggestion, to combine the focus and the commitment to excellence statements?
No,
Okay.
I think she was suggesting the second sentence of the commitment to excellence perhaps becomes separate to become the aspiration. Part of what the second sentence is meant to represent is a tangible way of understanding what does it mean to be the best. So when you're defining the best, so when we work with staff or work with teachers in the school district, understand, here's where we are today, this is where we aspire to be, and this is the definition of where we aspire to be. So it actually is understood. I think Laura was suggesting that perhaps that goes even above the commitment to excellence, and I'm just going to say it's the aspiration. I don't know what the word is we're going to call it, but that was the conversation based upon what we interpreted from the notes of the retreat.
And again, the metric is certainly up for discussion.
Mhm.
But the purpose was to really do two things. One was to assign a specific metric to that aspirational goal. And the other was to make it crystal clear as people read the plan that they understand that this is the first year of what is going to be a 5-year journey. So,
First, my overall take on it is I think you've done a good job of synthesizing what we discussed in our retreat and is captured in this photo shot of the piece of paper we had up on the wall that we wrote down. So I think you've done a good job of capturing those elements. We're wordsmithing a little bit on a couple of the details, which I think are important, but in the big picture, I think this is really, really close to what we've all talked about and agreed to over the last 6 months or so.
well, maybe we should hop into the discussion about the benchmarks and the indicators, because that really, I think, will put some flesh on the bones.
It's fine. So based upon the information we discussed and the current report card results that we've had access to date, with the exception of progress, we've tried to frame everything in the context of benchmarks. So the first one is student achievement. Achievement at or above projected performance levels. And as Laura and I were going through and trying to synthesize everything that existed, we tried to come up with one or more ways of trying to put specific indicators with benchmarks in front of them, in front of you. So we're just going to go through these. It can be an or conversation, or it could be an and conversation. You might decide you want all three. You might decide you want 2 of the 3. We've tried to present them in different formats to start a conversation about how the data would be utilized to best explain publicly what the aspiration is and the specific targets that would be required for this year in 2016-17. So the first is increase the performance index on the state report card from 81.5% to blank % or higher. We will, on Thursday, upon public release of the report card, receive 81.5% on the performance index. In comparison to last year, and again, different set of metrics, different number of indicators, different tests, last year's performance index was 84.4% within the school district. At 84.4 last year, it's 81.5 this year, using the new tests, the new metrics, and the new number of indicators. So there's actually less indicators this year, different tests, and now a different percentage. So the question becomes, what is the incremental growth necessary to demonstrate the continuous improvement that the board envisions? That would be the first example of fill in the blank. The second is increase the performance index rank as compared to all Ohio schools this report card to the top blank %. And again, different way of looking at it, but until we see the rankings on Thursday, I don't know what that blank would become to see what incremental and realistic actually would look like within the school district. But again, different way of actually presenting the data using performance index, which is the specific levels of student achievement on a specific test. So performance index indicates where the students actually score: limited, basic, proficient, accelerated, advanced, or advanced plus are the ratings based upon the actual performance level. The third is at least blank % of students will score at accelerated, advanced, or advanced plus levels on state assessments. And right now, if everything stays the way they claim it's going to be when it's released on Thursday, the current percentage is 56.1% of our students scored at accelerated, advanced, or advanced plus, the 3 highest levels of the test. So the 2015 answer would be 56.1%. The 2014 answer last year was 62.7%. And again, the test changed. They're no longer PARCC, they're now AIR. So we came to new assessments. So there's different assessments this year throughout the state. I don't know, and I understand that there's a drop in the students that actually received accelerated, advanced, or scored at accelerated, advanced, or advanced plus. I don't know what that means in comparison to the rest of the state. Our students could still have outperformed other students within the state. I don't know that until we see all the data on Thursday. Again, different way of looking at it, but we try to, based upon the conversation, there was a significant discussion during the retreat related to student performance levels on state assessments as illustrated by the report card. And we took the 3 highest levels because that would be part of our expectation. We're not expecting students to be basic or limited. You can be proficient and you will pass the state assessment, but we have higher aspiration beyond ultimately proficient within the school district. We want the 3 highest levels.
And are we trying to write these for 1 year now, or?
This is for 2016-17.
Okay.
So the question could become, and I'll just use it as an example, and I don't know that it's the answer, but like in the first one, increase the performance index on the state report card from 81.5% to 87.5%, as an example. I don't know what that means as far as the number of students that 6% would represent until we see what happens on Thursday. But again, it would be incremental growth going towards the 95th percentile is the example. So you can't get from 81.5 to 95 overnight. What's the incremental growth that's necessary that we can demonstrate to hold ourselves to a higher standard? That's what I'm attempting to illustrate in the first one.
I know we got our data, well, of course it's late. What's the expected return on the data for?
Moving forward, September each year.
Okay.
We'll see preliminary data in late summer, late June, hopefully early July, when we go through the data check, because we actually get the data back to try to verify that they actually took the data and put the kids where they truly do belong. Sometimes they mix up the grade level. They'll switch kids in grade levels. So we have to catch those things and put the kid back in the right grade level.
But as far as, I mean, there's always time to improve and change, but as far as collecting data for the 16-17 school year, making adjustments for the 17-18 school year,
We would have
that
time.
have to happen.
It'd be similar to what we're doing right now.
Right, exactly. So there's going to be this, I guess, just to remind people, there's always going to be a little bit of a lag in terms of, the numbers that they're seeing versus how the students are actually performing.
We hope for preliminary data to come to the district at the end of June. This year was early July.
Yeah.
So we don't control that. And then you go through a 6-week window where you actually scrub the data and actually verify specific tests at specific times. They don't give it all to you at one time. You get chunks of it at different windows. And then you go through a 2-week reporting period to actually appeal something that's wrong in the data back to the state. And that happens over the course of 6 weeks in the summer.
Piggybacking on John's point, do we have what I would refer to as leading indicators that we can use over the course of the school year, like map test data, that we have some evidence is predictive of state report card performance?
Yes. We would say there should be a correlation between MAP. MAP is a different assessment. It's not AIR. It's not the state assessment. But it would be trying to do a correlation between the percentile ranking associated to the MAP score and what it looks like on the state assessment. So it is possible to try to create a corollary between the two.
I'm thinking from a management point of view, so that you, as the executive and your building leaders and teachers have data over the course of the year that they can use to get to keep them on track, getting to the outcome that we're shooting for at the end of the year.
And the answer is yes. And the best example I can give you is actually related to progress, that part of the MAP metric illustrates student growth over the school year. And that then correlates on the state assessment to the progress measure, which comes out tomorrow and officially on Thursday, to see if the student showed this in the MAP assessment, what's the correlation to the value-added growth at the state level? And is there comparability between the two for statistical reliability?
So to the extent that you have that, I think it would be, how often do you do map testing?
3 times a year.
So once you collect the data from that map testing, I think it would be good to report out on how you see the progress going over the course of the year, based on your best judgment as to the correlation of the map testing to the report card that we're benchmarking against.
So the MAP test, the second one is going to be the one that's meaningful, because the first one's just a benchmark.
Correct.
So when is the second one given?
Mr. Emery?
In the winter, I'm not sure if it's January.
Because we moved this one up by 3 weeks, correct? We did the first administration 3 weeks earlier than last year to try to get the baseline data.
And I agree with Phil. I think that's a great tool to look at to see, are we moving the needle? And then, but you'll only get that snapshot, mid-year, but at least it gives you some leading indicator
Right.
of
And
whether
then in
we're
the
making
spring.
progress.
Right.
In the spring, it's kind of end of year, so you don't have much to impact after that one.
Sure, but okay, I get your point. But my whole goal on accountability is leading people to success. It's not using a stick when we fail. It's about using tools during the course of the project to be successful, to help people be successful. So that's why I want to focus on these interim measures so that we can keep moving forward. Or a chance to make an impact
correct.
and affect the outcome.
Yeah, I think MAP is great for that.
Although, don't you think that if we have an aligned curriculum and common assessments, that's another way of being able to see if we're on track?
I think the common assessments in the student work can be used as formative for purposes of looking to see where we're making progress. And we're trying to unpack some of that right now across the school district and developing common assessments, because not every grade level has them in every subject. So that's also part of the curriculum lift that has to take place with the pacing guides and actually creating the common assessments. I mean, second grade math teachers spent probably 3 weeks, Scott, this summer working together to create the common assessments. So that now has to be replicated across grade levels. So it's not a turnkey. There's work that has to happen from professional development time and actually giving teachers the time to actually create the common assessments to then implement them and actually sit down and go through the work. And Scott's been doing that, as will Shirley, at the middle school and high school, of working with classroom teachers to actually look at those results and understand what the results are saying. And if students are succeeding in different ways in different places or different classrooms, why is that? What's happening? And make it a safe conversation, because it's an opportunity. If someone's found a piece of the magic that kids have basically discovered and it's working, how do we replicate that and celebrate the fact that someone's doing that?
So what is your goal on having those common assessments in place? Is it not this school year?
No, we're working through them. I mean, it's going to take time. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a turnkey. It's not an overnight.
No, that's
I mean,
why I was
summer
asking you.
was very busy.
Yeah.
Math is a dominant focus, and I alluded to that during the retreat, that given the indicators on the report card and the results that are coming out on Thursday, we have opportunities in mathematics. So we need to focus on K through 12 mathematics and have a very legitimate, direct conversation about what we're doing K through 12.
So overall, I like the items that are listed in this first benchmark. I have no problem with measuring all of them. I start to have a problem if we are going to claim we are focusing on all of them, because to your point about focusing on math, we can't, if we focus on everything, we end up focusing on nothing.
That's my concern.
So I think it's fine to measure this to the extent that the measurements give us some meaningful insight into how we're doing. But I think when we're going to have to decide which element is the one that is going to be the fundamental benchmark for that particular item.
Maybe it's good to keep one that is kind of a New Albany goal and then one that's more external, like the Ohio School District goal. Like, so we could have one that is a real internally focused one, but then I like the idea of constantly measuring ourselves to other school districts as well.
You can do both. And I mean, I guess it would stand to reason that if you focus on improving math, where there's room for improvement, you're going to boost your overall performance index.
Yes.
So
If
if
your
one
scores go
kind of
up,
does
one's going to benefit across the board. It's the same thing, back to Debbie's point, and I would say the New Albany one, with the number of students scoring accelerated advanced and advanced plus, that would be an expectation within our community that we don't want students to really just score at the proficient level. We want the higher level of achievement. That's what those levels represent on the state assessment. That's what they're called. So we want students scoring at those higher levels to demonstrate that they actually have a depth of content knowledge that then can result in the application to get the higher score.
So we would have to have a specific target for that we think might correlate to the specific target for the external benchmark.
Potentially, the top is going to be interpreted differently than a percentage, because like right now, when you go back to the 62.7% of the kids in 14 that had scored at Accelerated Advanced and Advanced Plus, and again, it was a different test, than 56.1 in 15. I don't know what that'll look like compared to, like, if you would say we want to be in the top, I'm just going to say 10%.
Yeah.
If we would go look at all the school districts in this year's data who were in the top 10% for this measure, what was their level of achievement for Accelerated Advanced and Advanced Plus? So there could be a correlation for relationship.
And this measure is all the way K through 12?
No, this is specifically for the students that have access to a state assessment. So it's grades 3 through 8 and high school core content. So it is not K through 2. Grades 3 through 12, the high school specific core subjects, as indicated. And the easiest place I can tell you, Paul, to look is on this report card packet. The first page shows you all the grades and which specific tests are given. It would be these tests.
Okay.
That's what they represent.
Excuse me.
Should we continue moving along?
Sure. Benchmark 2 is facilitate a year or more of growth for every year of instruction. This is the progress metric on the report card. Again, this data does not come out until tomorrow. I have no idea what it's going to say. The overall component grade measuring progress of all students in math and reading in grades 4 through 8 as calculated by ODE will demonstrate at least 1 year's worth of growth or higher. Regardless of the data that gets released tomorrow, I think it should be an expectation of us within the school district that for a year's worth of instruction, you demonstrate at least a year's worth of growth. I think that should be the minimum.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, we want more than that if it's possible. And we have many teachers across the school district that actually, based upon the instruction that they deliver from a content standpoint, students demonstrate more than a year's worth of growth. But regardless of what that number is tomorrow, or if we're red, yellow, and green, because it gets color coded, red is not good. Yellow is actually a year's worth of growth. Green is more than a year's worth of growth. So as long as we're in the yellow and the green, it's a beautiful thing. But regardless of what that says tomorrow, I think it's realistic to expect for a year's worth of instruction, I expect a year's worth of growth.
Seems like a reasonable expectation
I agree.
as a minimum. I'm taken by your comment that you have no idea what the report card is going to show. So
I don't know for progress.
for that one. So I'm
Yes.
back to the question, do we have any leading indicators that we can use over the course of the year so that next summer
Right.
you will have a reasonable idea?
We will tell you that the MAP data that currently exists from the spring administration of the school district demonstrates more than a year's worth of growth.
Okay.
So we believe it's going to show lots of green tomorrow. If it doesn't, we have a lot of work to figure out as to why. Now, it was a new test by the state, but then we have to compare ourselves to the other high achieving school districts within the state of Ohio. What does their progress look like? The one positive that I believe will be illustrated tomorrow, because the progress metric is grades 4 through 8, it's reading and mathematics, and it's in 3 specific subgroup categories. So it's gifted, students with disabilities, and the students in the lowest 20% across the state of Ohio pool, not in New Albany, across the entire state of Ohio pool. We met the gifted indicator. I know that because I've seen our preliminary results in the report card. I've also talked to several other superintendents in Franklin County that did not meet the gifted indicator. So that's a good sign
And that's
from my
growing
perspective.
gifted by a
Growing
year.
gifted for more than a year.
That's good.
So we met it as a school district. I'm not going to tell you we don't have opportunities. We still do have opportunities where there can be improvement in gifted at the secondary level, but we did meet it overall as a school district. So we're one of the few, I believe, and I don't have it until Thursday when it officially comes out, but based upon the discussions I've had with some fellow superintendents, I found out that they did not meet the gifted indicator.
So did you have some indication from the MAP data that that would be the case?
Yes. The MAP data illustrated progressively more than a year's worth of growth. And we have to believe that that will be replicated on the state test and come back on the state assessment to also illustrate more than a year's worth of growth.
So to clarify, trying to make this measurable, did I hear you say this is 4 through 8 math and reading across 3 categories?
It's
Gifted, bottom 20%, and
it includes gifted, students with disabilities in the lowest 20%, and achievement in the statewide pool. Those are the 3 subgroups, and there's a component grade that's issued for that. In 2014, the gifted grade on the report card was an A. The students with disabilities grade was a C, and the lowest 20% subgroup in the statewide pool was a D, as in dog. I don't know what this year's is because we haven't seen tomorrow.
There's also an overall.
Yes, and then those 3 individuals become an overall grade. So the way this is written, it's the component grade to basically say that last year the component grade was an A. I don't know what this year's component grade is. I'm hopeful that it's green, 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 green. Yellow's good too because it's a year's worth of growth, and we'll receive an A tomorrow, but I haven't seen that.
And part of the challenge with that is with having a different test last year.
Right.
And then this different, apparently more rigorous test that we had this year, how that will impact growth will be interesting to see.
Right. This is the to be determined one. That's why I put the note on here. And I also wanted to remind you, just in case you would forget, because it's probably not something you would remember, in 2018, the high school assessments also get a value added measure. So right now it's only 4 through 8 reading and math as calculated in those 3 subgroups. In 18, we add the high school assessments as well. That's the coming attraction from the state
For those 3 subgroups again, for the high school.
for the state assessments.
so could we meet this benchmark next year and still have C's and D's in some categories?
Potentially, yes, if the way it's calculated.
And that's one I just feel like from a non-educator perspective, just trying to make sure we simplify this enough for the community and standpoint of, I don't know if simplify is the right word, but it's challenging, I think, to hear about C's and D's and scoring ourselves an A. And I'm speaking as a parent. So I'll have to work on that one.
That's why we're sharing it.
Am I remembering correctly that last year the budget, the spending for gifted was lower than the year prior? Or at least the year prior to that?
We had fewer staff.
Yes, there were fewer staff last year. And
We did accelerated, we did some other things to make sure that we were providing the gifted service. I guess I'm trying to put 2 and 2 together and see if there either is a correlation or frankly is not a correlation between dollars and outcomes necessarily. And at least in this case, because we found other ways of providing those services without dedicated staff, we achieved really good outcomes for gifted students.
yes, overall as a district, we met the gifted indicator. I will tell you at the secondary level, there's still an opportunity because it was not met a specific building level. So that's something we're currently working through to unpack to try to determine, back to your exact point, what changed within the building where the service is different. How did this specifically look at what stopped happening for kids versus what started happening for kids, to try to come back to that same conclusion, because it's not replicated K through 12 because we met the indicator as a district. And again, I'll be transparent. We didn't meet it by much. We met it. We're over the threshold. We're not surpassing it by leaps and bounds. We barely made it over the threshold, but it appears we're one of the few in Central Ohio that actually did.
And which grades did we slip on gifted?
Middle school.
Middle school. And those were not pull-out services we offered in middle school?
Yeah.
So we'll learn.
That's part of why we're presenting it.
Yep.
Benchmark 3, meet or exceed state's achievement and gap closing standards at the district and building levels. This is specifically for the gap closing measure on the state report card. I will begin by telling you, because it will be public on Thursday, this is the F on the New Albany Plain Local School District report card that I anticipate seeing. We have opportunities, and I will tell you that they're tremendous within 3 specific areas that I think need to be paid attention to, and that's basically how we wrote the metric for what the indicator would become. So for subgroups based upon ethnicity, race, or socioeconomic status that scored below the state proficiency goal established on the 2016 ODE gap closing report, the percent of students scoring proficient in reading and math in grades 4 through 8 will increase by, and I put 5% in there right now because I haven't finished this work, on the 2017 ODE gap closing report. So we had a B last year in gap closing. We have an F this year. New tests, new standards, new benchmarks. Don't have any idea how we're going to compare to other school districts, short of the few superintendents that I've talked to. There's a few assessments that are in common across specific grade levels that have appeared to be a challenge in every school district. So it could be the test. Don't know until we see what comes out from the department as part of the analysis. But we have, within our student population, opportunities within ethnicity, race, or socioeconomic status that we need to pause, unpack, specifically look at the types of intervention or support services that are being provided to meet the specific academic needs of students, and verify that we are in fact doing everything that we can and should be doing to help students achieve at high levels.
Do you know what percentage of kids that is for us? Or just ballpark even?
It's different by test. So what I would tell you, and we'll put together an executive summary for you in your packet, Debbie, the one that had the report card front. It's this chart that has AMOs in it. So it's the one that turns sideways that shows you the 10 subgroups in the state of Ohio. And the specific goal for the one I have is the reading page. It's on page 1 of 6, but it's not numbered correctly. It's just the way it is. The benchmark this year for the state was 74.2. And I'll just use the socioeconomic status as the example. If you look at the chart, there were 222 students in grades 4 through 8 that took the ELA test that were specifically qualified as socioeconomic status. 101 of those students, 95 were proficient, 6 took the alternate assessment. So there's 101 total that were deemed proficient on the state assessment, which was 45.5%. The state requirement for gap closure was 74.2. So our gap was 28.7%. So when we get this report, what we have access to is we can click on these cells and actually drill down to the specific student level, to a specific student in a specific grade for a specific test, and then align that to the intervention support services that were or were not provided to try to lift that student up and provide the necessary support so he or she could be successful. That's the work that's now going on behind the scenes with Mr. Emery and the principals as an example at the elementary level for grades 4 and 5, and Mrs. LeBeau and Dr. Hamilton for grades 6, 7, and 8.
I mean, this is the reason we take all these tests, is so we can have this data, so we can help students who we're not helping enough. I think sometimes it gets lost why we're taking tests, and if we're using it for the right reasons, it is very, very helpful. Like, this kind of data is incredible to have.
But it's an important conversation to have, and I know it's a sensitive conversation to have. Because we're talking about students that are at risk, but we have students in our school district that are at risk academically. We have to pay attention to those students, and we have to put a plan in place to ensure that they can be successful. And when we get this back to your point, this is the summative. There are formatives along the way that are identified by the classroom teacher that triggers the intervention support services process at the building level to try to put interventions in place before we get to this. So now this is summative data. We need to unpack this and go back to, like my example, if I would click on this in the actual live document and drill down to the student level, find Johnny Jones. I need to know last year in fourth grade, what services did Johnny Jones receive? And if they clearly did not meet his needs, why?
Yeah.
That needs to be a legitimate conversation we're having within the school district to determine what, if anything, can we do differently, because more of the same is not going to solve this issue for Johnny Jones. That needs to happen for every student that represents part of the gap. This is a lift.
If we improve 5% per year, maybe mixing apples and oranges, are we still failing if we have a 28%? Or is
It depends on what the state benchmark becomes, and I just threw a number in there because we have to first figure out what's the sum of the whole of the problem, and then determine how we make that growth. I don't know that 5% is the right number. It was the conversation that I've had at the senior level leadership discussion within the school district as we're trying to unpack this to understand how big is it and how do we get there? Because at the end of the day, we want the gap to be zero. We want every student to actually surpass what the state minimum is, because this metric for the goal is specifically for gap closure. And just so when you go home, you know it's true. Gap is measured for reading and math grades 4 through 8 and graduation. Graduation's never an issue because we far surpass the state standards. But when you flip through these charts, the second one in math on the next page, you'll see the gap percentage changes from a state requirement. The goal for math is 68.5 this year. It will change next year, and that has to become part of the conversation. But the English language arts standard this year was higher than the math standard. That will be the same next year. English language arts will still be higher than math because it's basically through the state assessment, whatever the gap closure is that the state's identified across all the school districts created the statewide pool. So that is actually accurate. If you go home and you look at this, the percentages of what you have to achieve are not the same. Benchmark 4 for graduate students, college and career ready. This was the conversation that represents the other achievement type components within the state report card. So the district will continue to earn an A, or a grade of A for the graduation rate component on the state report card. I have no reason to believe that that is not achievable given the history within the school district. We've always earned an A in graduation rate. We surpassed the 98% threshold annually on a 4-year, 5-year graduation. There's a dual calculation for the cohort. If we're not 100%, and this is how it's calculated from the state, and it sounds very confusing, but the day that the freshman class starts, the same number of students have to graduate 4 years later. If that cohort that started on the first day as a freshman is the denominators not the, or numerators not the same, or denominators not the same, excuse me, on the last day when they walk across the stage, they count against you. So even if they move out of the school district and go to a different school district, they're still on our number. The day that cohort starts is who's supposed to walk across the stage. That's the tracking system used in the state methodology for graduation. So if we're not 100%, it's because someone left. How it works. ACT mean.
What happens if someone joins that year? Do they offset?
No, they don't offset. They're not part of that cohort. There's no logic, just it's how it's calculated. It's not worth the headspace of trying to argue about it. The ACT mean score will be 20% higher than the state average. So I gave you this document. This is the history. This is what we use. This is the ACT report that comes to the school district, and it will show you at the top in the table the 5-year trend. The 2016, we had 280 students that actually participated in the ACT. Our composites at the far right, so our composite score for 2016 was 25.7. The state composite's 22. And then you can see the previous 4 years of testing data similarly in each discipline that's tested, as well as the composite. And you can see that we have continued over the course of the last 3 years to continue to increase the overall ACT composite. Now, in relationship to the number that I filled in here, I put 20% higher. This year's state composite's 22, so it would put us at, if it's 4% higher, take us to 26.4 is what the 20% would represent. And I only put 20% there because this is the first year under state law that all juniors in a school district must participate in a standardized assessment to prove that they're college and career ready. The choice is the ACT or the SAT, and it's paid for by the state. We're going to administer the ACT to all juniors. That's in addition to any junior, senior, sophomore, freshman, because anyone can take the ACT. We have 8th graders that take the ACT. They count in our number. So this 280 kids that's represented in the 2016 could be students in grades 8 through 12 that took the ACT. This number is going to dramatically change next year because every junior has to take it, plus any other 8th, 9th, 10th, and 12th graders that choose to take the ACT. So although I'm saying we're going to be 20% higher than the state pool, I'm going to tell you honestly sitting here, I believe the state composite's going to probably drop because all juniors in the state of Ohio are going to be taking the ACT or SAT, and the majority of school districts in Ohio will choose the ACT because it's for state schools. SAT is dominantly used for students that are going out of state. ACT is dominantly used for students staying in the state of Ohio.
And ACT is becoming more dominant nationwide.
Yes. Because of the quality core and what it represents through the whole ACT process, ACT is becoming the first choice. So again, we can talk about what you think the right percentage is in there, but because we're adding hundreds of students that are now going to be required, trying to maintain our current level, but even going 20% higher on this year's state composites, higher than our current composite, which I think is still a stretch, given the fact that so many more students are going to be taking the test. At least blank percentage of juniors and seniors participate in advanced placement or college credit plus courses as reported for the Prepared for Success data measure. So this year's data number on the report card on Thursday, the AP participation is 69.7%.
For both juniors and
Juniors and seniors, so it's 69.7% was the 2015 number. And the 2014 number is 64.8%. So we had more students participate in AP this year than last. For College Credit Plus, the 2015 number is 21.6%. The 2014 number was 1.9%. We have a significant increase in College Credit Plus for dual enrollment.
Isn't that the first year we offered it?
We've had some courses minimum at the high school. That's the Kenyon class as an example. Historically, we've added Columbus State, we've added Ohio State, and we've had more students that are actually taking other higher education courses off campus. That's what's increased the enrollment. So again, we'd have to come up with what is that number to determine, but we do believe it's realistic that we have an aspiration that kids should leave as part of being college and career ready, that you have the ability to earn college credit while still enrolled in high school, either through the AP examination, and I'll get to that in a second, for scoring 3 or higher, or so that's participation in AP, that's the first piece, or participating in College Credit Plus. The second one is at least blank percentage of juniors and seniors earn a score of 3 or higher on advanced placement exams. So this year's rating that will be on the Prepared for Success report card on Thursday is 49.8% for 2015. In 2014, it was 48.5%. So slight increase between the two for number of students earning AP credit. Now, I want to add a qualifier here, and Dr. Troyer and I actually are working with Dr. Hamilton and Mr. Carter on this issue. In our school, I don't know all the reasons as to why, so let me preface this and tell you, because I know you're going to ask me why. I don't know why yet. We will get you an answer. In our school district, students enrolled in an AP course at the high school are not required to take the AP exam. So you're participating, but you're not required to sit for the test to earn college credit.
Do you
Is
want to
that-
make that an item of discussion?
Is
I
that
believe that if you're,
unusual?
I think it's extremely unusual, and I don't know, and we're going to try to find that out through one of our networks to ask other school districts. If you're taking the rigor of the course to have exposure to it for college credit, you should take the exam to see if you actually have learned the content necessary to earn the college credit. I understand there's a fee, and it's significant, $195-ish. It's expensive. It's an expensive test, but you earn 3 semester hours for college credit if you pass. And the 3 semester hours at $195, ballpark number, is cheaper than what you're going to pay on the college credit for at the college.
So assume, or if we were to go down that route, we would have to confront the reality of selection bias, that generally the kids who take the test feel more confident that they will do well on the test. So if we make everybody take it, there's a high likelihood that a smaller percentage will achieve a 3 or higher. As long as we understand that.
We're having that conversation. The last one's New Albany High School will continue to be ranked in the top 500 schools in the nation as ranked by U.S. News and World Report or Newsweek. I do have U.S. World News Report. New Albany High School was ranked number 540 in 2016, so that's our current rating for U.S. News and World Report. In the nation, that's the national ranking, so we're number 540 in the nation. We're number 20 in the state of Ohio.
U.S. News and World Report publish their metrics by
Yes.
which,
It's all there.
and do you feel that it is a reasonable aspiration, or is this fluff?
No, I think it's a reasonable aspiration when you compare the other school districts that are actually on the list and the rigor of what they probably represent for academic achievement and why we would want to be modeled with them or classified with them for the types of school districts that and the academic achievement that actually students do achieve. But it incorporates the college readiness, AP testing, the percentage of students participating versus the percentage of students that actually pass, mathematic proficiency, English language arts. So there's multiple components into their metric. So I actually think it is legitimate to look at specifically. And I think the Ohio data, when you go back to the number of schools in Ohio for high school purposes, it's great to see where we're at. But it's one more comparison versus just the state assessment. So it'd be interesting to take that list and its ranking and compare it to what's the ranking on the state assessment, just to see where it does fall for the difference in the correlation of what's being measured.
If you think it's a reasonable measure and the other members think it's reasonable and the basis of the measurement is objective and known, then that's fine. I only have one other very minor quibble with benchmark 4. I realize this is a draft, but with credit to my mother and English teachers, I don't think you want students to be plural possessive in the heading.
Oh, that's a typo. It's okay. You can tell us. That's why it says draft. You see that watermark?
I know it says draft. I just, the language arts teachers here are gonna, they'll see it. And,
It's good. See, it shows that you're reading the devil in the detail. Thank you. Benchmark 5, school culture and social and emotional well-being. This tries to attempt to incorporate the conversations related to developmental outcomes. So implement age-appropriate student climate surveys to establish baseline data to determine the percentage of students who feel safe at school, supported, and have at least one staff member to approach with problems. So that was the genesis of our synthesizing your conversation, where you had 100% of students feel safe at school, 100% of students feel supported, 100% of students have someone to go to. Mrs. Kohler and I tried to translate that. So that's our attempt at doing that. We have not selected what instruments would be used. Clearly, we need to figure that out as part of this conversation. There have been some historical surveys that have been given in the school district We have a couple that are in the queue based upon partnerships with Concord Counseling and our Children's Hospital that could contribute to this, but we'd have to make sure it's measuring the 3 areas that you specifically identified or others.
What about Gallup? I thought we were doing some work with them.
Excuse me.
I don't know that that's recent.
Right, I think that's actually the survey that Battelle for Kids worked with to make available to school districts. And so we had explored using that. I think it was not this last year, but the year before maybe. I'm not sure exactly the time frame, but we ended up running into some glitches and didn't actually implement it for students. But it's something we could look at.
I'd just be curious to see what they measure in a school environment.
Yeah, they do. I think that one does cover these areas. I know it includes the one about, is there at least one adult in the school that you feel?
Right, that sounds familiar.
That sounds like Gallup.
Yeah.
There's also the COPE, is COPE the Concord one?
COPE is a new program we're implementing at the 6th grade level. I'm not sure that it has a survey that would be pertinent for all students.
So the question becomes, are you interested in doing the climate surveys? We'll find tools, but does this achieve what you are trying to do within the school culture and social emotional well-being conversation?
It seems like it sets the benchmark, right? It gives you something to work from. But is there something, I know these are benchmarks, not strategies or goals or objectives to accomplish throughout the year, but it would just seem like we'd want to also articulate what we're going to do,
When we get those
or we're
results.
going to do one immediately or as soon as possible, and then try to do one at the end of the year to see if our activities throughout the year helped improve that climate.
Yeah, I think understanding the frequency with which you want to conduct these and how you might use them makes a lot of sense. But I'm all for it as long as we do have consistency over time. There's a commitment to use an instrument for a period of time measured in multiple years, so that there's some correlation between the years. When we do these sorts of surveys for the associates in my business, we always learn something. We always learn something. So
That's the goal. Benchmark 6 is responsible fiscal management. This goes back to what Mrs. Kohler specifically described related to the feedback that was received from the community most recently during the survey for the superintendent search, and the data that was collected specifically related to fiscal management. And Becky, you're welcome to help me. The first is obtain annual GFOA Award for Excellence in Financial Rewarding for the district's CAFR. So it's our intent to say that we're going to continue to publish a high quality, comprehensive annual financial report for transparency of reporting to the school community. The second, receive a successful unqualified audit with fewer than 3 minor compliance citations. When the auditors come to visit and live here for weeks and weeks and weeks, our intent is that we receive an unqualified audit. The third is really looking towards the future. Reduce fiscal year 17 5-year forecast line item 4.500 total expenditures by $560,000 to illustrate a 1% reduction in operational expenditures to positively impact 5-year forecast and eliminate deficit spending forecasted in fiscal year 18. So when you look at the 5-year forecast that's in your packet, this is from May of 16, and Becky and I are in the process of working to create your October version. But specifically on 4.5, about halfway down the first middle of the page, you see that,
We're going to look at fiscal 17.
I'm sorry, fiscal 17, second column over, under forecasted. So down where it says 4.5, you see the deficit spending.
No, that's the total
The
expenditure.
1 million.
Line 6.01 is the deficit spending, the
There it
negative
is.
$1,063,553. What this goal is saying is that we're going to look at line 4.5 and reduce it by $560,000 in fiscal 17. to positively impact not only fiscal 17, but then fiscal 18. So if you go over one line and down to 6.01, you see the deficit spending that's referred to in the goal.
So when Becky and I met during the transition for me to the superintendency, one of my questions was, how do we maximize the use of district resources without spending more than we're collecting from a revenue perspective, unless it's absolutely necessary? By reducing line 4.5 by $560,000, it compounds to eliminate the deficit spending forecasted in 18. Based upon our analysis of the budget line items, I believe the opportunity for that cost savings is in 4.5 in our current discussions, and we intend to reduce 4.5 between now and June 30th for 2017's budget to benefit 2018, so that $1,063,553 is not in parentheses because we should not be deficit spending. So we will find the reductions necessary through cost savings, change in behavior, or change in district practice to generate at least $560,000 in savings that will eliminate next year's deficit spending. That's what we're saying.
That is correct.
That's ambitious.
But it's necessary because we do not want expenditures to outpace the revenue. So we've committed to trying to maximize our budget, and Becky and I, based upon our analysis, and she spent some quality time with me because I didn't get to play in all these line items in the past, have discovered that we believe there's an opportunity, and I believe it's necessary.
And
So
in
we're
his
going
current
to
role, he
do our best to fix that.
He may not have played in these line item details, but in his current role, he certainly affects them. So
So will you be taking us through what you're looking at?
once we've
Once
finished
we've
identifying.
figured it out. Fundamentally, do you philosophically agree that if there's a way for us to reduce the budget to stop deficit spending, you'd like for us to try to do that?
Agreed. And on this, the fiscal management in general, I would like to put this caption to the FRRC for discussion so that they can vet it and debate it some. They'll probably have some good insights, and probably to your question as well. So maybe inform our discussion.
And the FRRC meets this coming Monday, so we'll add that
That'd be
to the
timely.
agenda.
The last bullet's maintain or increase the district's bond rating with Moody's and Standards & Poor's rating agencies if the need for a bond rating recurs. So you'll recall we just did the bond sale. We saved over $2 million within the school district based upon the sale that Ms. Jenkins talked about at the last Board of Education meeting. We're adding this, that our intent would be that we have to maintain or increase our rating if we go back to market. So we don't know that we'll be back to market. However, if we are, that has a direct impact on our rating, which impacts how we actually sell the bond.
And we said Moody's and S&P. The district did have, I think it's 2006 issue, Fitch did a rating for the school district, but it's only on that one outstanding issue. And I've looked into trying to pay that off, and it doesn't have a call, so it's not one that we can take care of. So Moody's and S&P are really the two agencies that we would typically use. That's why we chose Moody's and S&P.
So the last benchmark is community engagement and stakeholder satisfaction.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Michael, apologize. I know we probably spent the least amount of time on what does financially sustainable mean during our last board session. So I think my only thought here, I know we're going to have a lot of discussion around this, is there a way to think bigger and broader and longer term? I know we've got the 5-year forecast, but we also have a community that is growing, and at some point will level off. And do we look out to the future, just as we're visioning about where the district can go academically and developmentally for our students, where it will go financially for our community and our residents? So.
The forecast, actually, it's not part of what gets reported to the state. The state determines that, but it actually goes out 10 years. And I believe you've asked for the actual Excel spreadsheet. So if you looked off to the right of the main forecast, you'd see those numbers, and I can print those and shoot them to you. But we already do a 10-year look. forward.
And I guess to that, and looking to ensure those are financially sustainable through that 10 years, and I suspect there's deficit spending going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, even if we eliminate the deficit spending in fiscal 18, it's not going to completely take care of the
No.
deficit spending in 19, 20, 21. So this is the 16, 17 focus. I'm not going to say that we can cut enough every year
Yeah.
for the next, 5, 10, 3, 4, whatever years to eliminate deficit spending.
I'm not suggesting that whatsoever.
Sure,
I'm
but-
suggesting as a board, we take on
Right.
the long-term issue.
Absolutely, but I do think that we need to have that conversation about what is fiscally sustainable. Do some of you think that it's cutting? Do some people think it's going to be reductions as much as we can, and then we will have to come back and ask for some operating levy amount? What is that? So
I think the 10-year forecast is going to really inform that conversation quite a bit because we'll know what we're talking about.
right.
And they'll have to be, that's also something that should probably go to the FRC for some detailed vetting, if only because there's a lot of assumptions built into these forecasts. And it's really understanding those assumptions so that we have a better understanding of the veracity of the forecast.
Right, and then to also point out, so the 5-year forecast, the forecasted years that are submitted to the state have a lot more detail. When we're looking at those next 5, it's really a run rate. This is what it's looked like. These are the averages for the last 5 years. If we apply those same increases overall, this is what it would look like.
But we believe during the next 10 years that enrollment levels off sometime
Yes.
after 5 years and before 10 years.
Yes.
So that's all built in at this point?
Yes.
Or
Assumptions.
okay.
When did we have our last enrollment projection report? When was that?
February or April of this past year.
Yeah.
I thought, so,
Because remember, we switched from what most likely to the
Yeah.
conservative.
Yeah, we went to from moderate to low.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is what we used when I came back in the summer and adjusted the number of staffing positions that were being forecasted.
But either way, that enrollment projection report still shows us within the 10-year period leveling
Leveling
off.
up,
You
yeah,
just
so-
how
yeah,
quickly
we
are we
do.
getting there?
Right.
Unless, additional developments come up in the district that we're not aware
That
of.
we don't know about.
Sure.
Right.
And
Or new revenue.
working to
Right.
understand those issues now too.
Yes,
So
yes.
all good stuff.
Anything else on that one?
Just we'll throw out some of the discussion we've had about transparency and just trying to demonstrate all the positive things that have happened in the past relative to efforts being made to bring back busing for a very limited amount, things like that, whereas it's maybe a communications issue in line with finance. How do we better communicate via the website? Or I know we've discussed some state software programs that come with a fee, but would enable you to really give as much transparency to the community who may read the headlines and say that, everything's coming back, how much are we spending? And in reality, $16,000 is where we've been at for busing, and just want to make sure that the message gets out there. So not really sure what the answer is, but thinking of activity goals, if you will, that might be something to think about for next year as well.
I know there's been a lot of media attention of late related to the online checkbook. You probably saw the newspaper articles to that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so we already do the Ohio checkbook
I was gonna say
online. But what Mr. Newmoff is talking about is then there's an addition to
Right.
that by the company that supplies that ohiocheckbook.com. The ohiocheckbook.com is free. The additional piece of that for this district is about $11,000 annually. I have talked to a couple of treasurers who used it for 1 year. Those treasurers did not feel that it gave them the bang for the buck, if you will. Thought it was just a nice way of coming up with some charts and graphs. And I've looked at it. It can create some really nice reports, well, charts and graphs for reports, but it doesn't really dig into the why, the how. And so the two treasurers that I talked to actually use it more internally, and they were not going to continue to use it going forward. But that's a product that you're talking about.
Sure,
something
no,
like
and
that.
as we discussed offline, that wasn't necessarily a
Right,
disagreement
something
there,
like that, yeah.
but that there was maybe something that you could customize.
Mhm.
Yeah, what else could
as
we
an
do, if
offset.
anything, that basically matches? Because we were one of the first school districts that were part of the pilot for the online checkbook. So I know it's got a lot of recent school districts. Why aren't you doing it? We were actually one of the pilot beta sites that actually tested it to actually go online first because we saw the value in doing it. But again, back to your point, there's other items that we can do related to fiscal transparency, then I think it's a conversation that we clearly would welcome having. Benchmark 7 for community engagement and stakeholder satisfaction. Implement annual community and staff surveys to establish baseline data to indicate level of satisfaction with educational quality, school culture, communications, climate, and fiscal management. There have been some sampling surveys that were controlled. The most recent one was the Saperstein survey that was done within the school district. That was a tele survey to plus or minus 300 homes deliberately for random sample. So there's some of that data that exists. The question becomes, what's the true baseline data that you want? Is it the parent population, much like the student population? Is it Joe taxpayer in New Albany, Ohio? Is it the random sampling similar to what we've done in the past with Saperstein? So we just need direction as to what does that mean, because this was part of your conversation about doing the internal with staff. We have students and staff, so we've done the internal climate piece. What do you want for the external facing? What does that represent? Is it random sampling? Is it a specific population? Is it, what do you want? So again, it's just to start the conversation if this is one of the benchmarks that you choose to include.
And what is the price tag on doing something like that once a year?
The random sampling with Saperstein was fairly expensive,
$8,500.
almost $9,000 for that random sample. And the analysis reports that come. And we have those from the last one. I don't know if they were distributed to everyone when it was done. I don't know how that was shared. But we can give you an example of the Saperstein one to look at if you haven't seen it.
My comment on the survey is the same as on the student survey, which is if we're going to commit to doing it, we should commit to doing it over over consecutive years. It should be the same instrument to the extent possible, so that there's some value in the comparisons. And if we are going to commit to these surveys, I might also suggest that we consider making it part of board policy so that it survives. So that it's something that is done. Future boards can always change the policy if they decide that it's not worth it. But just a thought to assure that there is some consistency over time.
So to summarize, and Mrs. Kohler, you're welcome to jump in. Again, Laura and I try to take all the work from the board retreat, transpose it into or synthesize it into what we believe to be 7 benchmarks with clearly work yet to be done. We don't know that these 7 accurately reflect everything that you wanted included, but we've attempted to try to capture through all the notes and conversation what those could be. I don't know that 7 is the right number. I don't know if you want to include them all. I don't know if you want to change them, or if there's something that we overtly missed and it would have been by accident. But we're welcome to continuously improve these. It's a continuous improvement plan. They're in draft format, and welcome any additional feedback, thoughts, or ideas that you have in order to continue to move this forward. Back to where Laura was, the intent of creating the district continuous improvement plan as a result of the retreat is then to translate that into performance goals specifically for me for 2016-17. So our conversations to date have been up to 4 that actually become equally weighted. And our goal technically is to do that before September 30th. So it is time bound, time sensitive, and we need to continue the work. That then will translate into, back to Mr. Darrow's point, we start at the highest level. How does that translate down through the organization for all of the performance expectations that happen K through 12? That's why we started with this tonight.
This is really, really good. I think it captures a lot of, both the spirit and the actual specifics of our conversation. And I feel like it's really helpful to have it in an action plan format. I'm just wondering on next steps. So we have a lot of blanks here. Are you feeling like we'll look at another draft of this when we have all the data?
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully hopefully as soon as we have all the data and before the next
Exactly.
meeting, so we can think about it before the next
Right,
meeting.
right. And then, provide feedback to Michael or to me, and we will incorporate your feedback
Okay.
into the new draft. And then my expectation is that we'll be in a position to be able to agree on something at our next meeting, which I believe is the 25th?
26th.
26th of September, so that we're in compliance with our timeline. The other piece of thinking that I need you to do, and I really will need you to provide input to me, and I will share it with Michael, is really thinking about how to translate this into specific goals for Michael. Obviously, there is going to be a distinction between district goals and Michael's goals. Michael's goals will be derived from what we agree will be the district goals, but they're not going to be one and the same. So what I need to understand from each of you is taking a look at this as the total district plan. What is it that we as a board expect Michael to accomplish in the next year that will move the needle the most? So
And we get to pick up to 4.
up to 4.
Up to 4.
And Michael, you might want to take a stab at it too for
Mhm.
us.
Well, Laura and I have
Wow.
been working behind the scenes, but I think it's important for you to continue to do what she's asking. What resonates with you specifically, because this is where the delicacy happens, that you have to come to some consensus as the board, because there can't be 5 individual, we all want this. And then it's not 5 times 4 to get 20, it's 4. So we have to come up with 4 maximum.
Okay.
And I think they have to be.
It's called focus.
They have to be in here. So
Yes.
they have to be in here.
Yes. Yes. Do we all agree?
Yeah.
That you're gonna find them in here,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
I have a couple of comments. First of all, I think this is excellent. I think, and I appreciate the work that went into pulling all of this together and putting it into something that we can talk about. So I think this is excellent. The other reason I think it's excellent, and to a point you made a little bit ago, Michael, about, these are the hard discussions. So I'll just read the language we agreed to on the definition of accountability, because there's been some discussion around the notion of accountability. And I always view accountability as moving us toward common goals and agreeing on what those are and then how we measure it. It's not a stick, it's a tool. And so the way we defined it is we will confront the truth. Right? So yes, there's an F on the report card in one thing. We're going to confront that. There are areas of deficiency. We're going to confront that. There are areas of excellence. We're going to confront and celebrate that. We're not going to hide from this stuff. We're going to put it on paper. We're going to set goals for achievement, and we're going to go ahead and make it happen. I mean, that's what we said we're going to do. So goals and objectives will be clearly defined at all levels of the district. I don't know. This seems like a really darn good start on having that very same thing. Because through the district, through the different buildings and classrooms. All individuals and groups, including staff, students, parents, and the Board of Education, will hold themselves and each other accountable to the achievement of those goals and objectives. We'll celebrate success at the individual and group level, and we will acknowledge, challenge, and commit to concrete actions to confront and correct failures. I don't think it gets any better than that. So I think this is really good.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing us full circle, because I do think that maybe one of the strongest parts of this whole exercise has been the commitment from the board to the administration, to the faculty, to staff members, to parents, to students, to get this buy-in, that these are not Michael's goals. These are not the board's wish list ideas. This is what we want to achieve as a school district. And it's going to take every single one of us having a laser focus on this direction that we're setting
Yep.
in order to achieve that. So I think it's very exciting. I think we've got the skeleton at least of a very strong plan.
And the last thing is, there was an item to be the employer of choice, and when we talked about that, we talked about it in the context of an employer of choice, and I look at it as the employer of choice around the focus that we have. So, we want to be the employer of choice with all of those who share the vision of where we're trying to take this district. But that's why we're the employer of choice. That's people who want to be here and share this vision. So
Mrs. Kohler and I also talked about the fact that could be incorporated as part of the climate survey on the internal stakeholders, as part of the questioning that actually would occur to basically derive that same information. But thank you for bringing that out.
And that's
because I
fine with
didn't
me.
say that at the time.
to incorporate it.
Right.
Yeah. I think as I looked over at that list again, I think that one area that we probably do need to look at in more depth is the quality profile. Because there's so much good information in that report. And I don't think it's that the
Adequately
depth of
represented.
that information is included in here yet.
It seems like, there's a consensus that both the state report card and the quality profile are relevant. So having two measurements that we look at and picking out the things we think are most important in those two, that's not too much. If we were to pick 3 or 4 things that we're going to measure ourselves against and try to pick out 3 or 4 things from all those, now we're back to Michael's, suddenly we're up to 20, and that's not realistic. That's not reasonable.
No. I do just want to remind everyone, because when we send you something, everyone will be on the email. We do not reply all. We reply to Michael or reply to Laura. And the other thing I would ask for, just to make sure we have it accurately reflected, it's very helpful to the two of us, and I didn't focus on it, but in your summations, Laura and I use these to try to inform this entire document. So if you do have specific thoughts about a benchmark, if you could outline it in an email and send it either to me or send it to Laura or to both of us, that's fine. Just do not reply all, because we do not conduct board business through email with the entire board. But if you could outline your thoughts specifically to the benchmarks, that would be very productive for the two of us as we try to continue to improve upon these to represent what you would like to see.
So just so I'm clear on our next step, so
Will you give them a deadline?
Yeah. So that, I'm a little confused now.
So wait, will
Do we
you,
they're going to respond
I think,
before.
yeah, we're going to come out with the information. So after the next iteration, we're going to
Okay,
get the
okay.
data on Thursday.
so you
Okay.
got
You're
the
going to
ball.
get the
So
first iteration,
we've got
okay?
it
So
first.
Yes.
when I send you the next iteration
Okay.
after the data
We'll
release,
react.
then it's go time.
Okay.
Yes.
So you will get that from us.
Okay.
And then once you receive it, that's when you're going to reply with your written responses to specific items that you would like to see modified, improved upon, changed, or whatever.
Yes,
That's when you can
within,
give a deadline.
And
within
in that
48
email
hours.
that we receive, that we send you, Mrs. Kohler will tell you your due date.
Okay.
I will. I'm thinking 48 hours. Is that reasonable? Yes, it's
Depends
reasonable.
on 48 hours.
I know,
Maybe
exactly.
72.
With 48 hours.
All right.
Not necessarily.
If I give them 48, it'll be
Maybe a maybe.
72.
Yeah.
I know this group. Great discussion. Thank you so much. Very productive.
Thank both of you for all the work on it, and Becky and everyone who contributed.
A pleasure.
I wasn't saying that on Saturday, so.
No, I know, this looks like it was a lot of work to distill this to where you got, so it's great.
Moving right along. Our next action item is the first reading of a proposed new policy called District Support Organizations. Mr. Sawyers?
Thank you, President Kohler. There are copies of the draft policy at the entrance to the cafeteria for anyone in the audience that did not pick one up that came in before they were put on the table, but Patrick did add some. You have in front of you this evening a recommendation from Neola related to a new policy within the school district for district support organizations. And this is an effort to create a standard on behalf of the Board of Education for school or support organizations that would like to be directly affiliated to the school district to benefit students either through extra educational opportunities, extracurricular activity, or direct support organizations within the specificity. In the second paragraph of the first page, district support organizations are defined as any nonprofit entity, group, or other organization formed and operating for the purpose of supporting district programs. That is the definition of what's represented. Representatives and members of approved support organizations shall in all circumstances be treated by district employees as interested friends of the schools and as supporters of public education in the school district. This is a lengthy policy that's been presented by Neola. I'm not going to go through every paragraph, but call out some specific elements associated to it that add structure. And we've attempted to try to wordsmith. It went back to Neola. Neola are attorneys, so attorneys send back what they believe should be represented within the policy that's being proposed. So this is their effort of trying to create the structure within the organization to talk about what would have to happen. So on the back of page 2, once you get to the introductory narrative, they've recommended the following rules and procedures that govern the working relationships between the board, the administration, and the support organizations. First one, based upon recent experience, is to make it abundantly clear within the school community, and although we value their service, school employees and board-approved school volunteers may not be directly compensated in any manner by district support organizations. They are encouraged to join the organization and or for special interest, but shall not be officers within positions belonging to the organization. So there's clearly a delineation of the employee within the school district that is separate from the booster organization, as an example. And we have a wide variety of them within the school district, but to make it clear that an employee that is hired by the Board of Education should not be serving as an officer within a specific organization itself.
So that's a major change for us.
That is a shift. Not in every organization, but in some organizations. But it is a change in practice of historical practice in the school
They
district.
can serve on it, just not as an officer.
They can participate, they can be actively involved, they just cannot be a seated officer. The district shall have the responsibility for the support organization to monitor its activities to assure compliance with board policy. They are directly being affiliated to the school district. There would be an expectation that they're going to support the school district, its organizations, its policy, rules, procedures, and administrative guidelines. E is just a recommendation. You're encouraged to set goals that are consistent with the program as well as the school district. And again, wide variety, could be sports related, could be academic related, could be theater, could be music, could be co-curricular. So we have a wide variety of different clubs, groups, and organizations that do an outstanding job within our school organization to benefit our kids. We're very grateful daily for everything they do to contribute to the school environment. And the purpose of this policy is to add structure to make sure there's a clear delineation of the school district versus the nonprofit organization. And if you want to be recognized as the official group through 501c3 purposes with the Board of Education, on the next page, there's some compliance requirements that specifically have to be put in place to ensure that the school district, in exchange for our cooperation to say that you're the directly affiliated club, group, or organization that's serving in that capacity, that you will do certain things. Letter A is first to maintain a current and valid 501c3 designation from the Internal Revenue Service and ultimately go through the provisions necessary to file tax exempt status and fulfill all the obligations that are imposed by the Internal Revenue Service related to that support organization. B on the back of the last page is you maintain your corporate existence and be in good standing with the state of Ohio, and that constitutes meeting all necessary filings for continued existence that are required under the statute and/or the rules associated to good standing with the state of Ohio and/or the Board of Education and the Secretary of State's office. C, that the organization would provide to the Board of Education a list of all officers within 30 days of the election. So we always know the name, the contact, and who that person is in a specific role. In the event, number one, we choose to contact the person for partnership purposes to open lines of communication for further improving what we currently do with all the support organizations. But from a parliamentary standpoint, also maintaining a record of who are the persons directly affiliated to that organization that the board is sanctioned as a direct affiliate. Letter D, the organization shall keep on file with the board the current bylaws of the organization. Again, it's just a filing. We're not dictating bylaws to the organization. All we're asking for is a copy of the bylaws to be provided to the school district. And letter E, the organization shall provide annual financial statements to the board upon request, with such financial statements in audited form if so available. And again, it's to maintain the lines of communication that if we're asked a question through the Board of Education related to the affiliated organization, that they in fact have complied with what the requirements are to be directly affiliated, named, and recognized with the school district. And then the last paragraph is compliance with the provisions of the section's mandatory condition for the support organization to be granted permission to utilize the school district name, as well as any logos or other insignia or emblems associated with and used to identify the school district or the school-sponsored programs and activities, or to use our facilities for its operations. So that's the goal, is to really just create open lines of communication and transparency for directly support organizations that are recognized by the Board of Education as the official music boosters, as the official, and we have several representatives of our theater boosters right here. So wonderful organization. So if they want to be the New Albany Plain Local School District Theater Boosters, they will give us some information. And that's really what we're asking for, is can we open the dialogue and have transparent communications to protect the school district and protect all the members of the organization. That's our goal.
The point of this policy too, I think it's a protection for those organizations. As we've seen recently with our athletic boosters, that some of these things were not happening. And if you're reporting them to us, then you know that you have to do it. And if we don't get it, then we can say, hey, what happened? Probably need to do this.
I look at it the same way I look at the other discussion on accountability. I mean, this is helpful to these organizations because, look, complying with some of these laws is complicated and confusing, and, you know, having help from a professional to say you need to file this stuff is helpful.
Absolutely.
Everyone has the right intentions, and we want to make that abundantly clear. This is not meant to be punitive in any way, shape, or form. This is meant to be proactive on behalf of the school district, back to Mr. Darrow's point and Ms. Jenkins, to support the organizations beyond the capacity that we have to date. They have external rights. They're not technically a district organization, but we're giving them the ability to be recognized by the Board of Education as the official organization. And in exchange for that, based upon the conversations with council, they're recommending that there's some compliance requirements that need to be met.
And although we have no real control over them, we're not saying this is how you'll be formed, this is what you'll look like. But because they say we're the New Albany Athletic Boosters, the New Albany Middle School PTO, the whatever, it's like it's ours. So what happens with them is reflected on us, even though we don't control their organization.
So just one thought. I think this looks really good. I think it's thorough. I think we need it. And I agree. I think it actually is helpful over the years to have something in place like this that just kind of ticks off the list of, okay, these are the things I'm required to do in my official role. I'm just wondering for them now, someone needs to, like either the treasurer, the president, someone needs to be accountable, and that has to be written into their bylaws, that one person probably is the point person on this. just so, like, I recently requested all the bylaws from the PTOs, and I got them from a bunch of different people in those organizations, and I still don't have one of them. So I just think maybe for clarity, for them and for us, there should be like either the treasurer or the president appointed to just be the point person when the board requests something.
Okay.
Well, I
And-
think we would have to do that through our policy because we can't.
You can't
ask-
dictate
you
their
can't tell
bylaws.
them
Where you
to
could,
change their
where we could
bylaws.
go, because I was going to
Yeah.
tell you, that's open for legal interpretation, because we don't have the right to tell them to change their bylaws. We do have the right to specify within your policy, like on page 3, letter A, under support organization compliance. It says the organization shall maintain, and then number 1, the organization shall provide. It could say the organization's president or treasurer shall provide.
That's all I'm thinking.
That you have the ability to incorporate. We do not have the reach to go into any organization and dictate any change to their bylaws. So you have a right, we could even say an officer of the organization, and then it's up to 4 generally, the president, the vice president, the secretary, and the treasurer. Someone in a leadership role elected to the office is required to provide that.
Ultimately, it's up to that organization to have
Right.
efficient operations and comply with the requirements.
But we could improve upon this, back to your point, Debbie, that we could say an officer within the organization, and then it's up to the organization to decide. You've dictated it's from the elected official. That's as far reach as you're allowed to get from what we've had in conversations with council.
Okay.
I have asked the Attorney General's office to come in. I believe it's November 9th. I'm working to identify all of the different support organizations
Okay.
we have in the district and invite them so that they can do, I think it's like a 1-hour presentation. And they do this frequently to come in and talk about what our best practices and what you should do to, register with the AG's office. What are best practices? How do you maintain your 501c3? What filings should you do? Those things. So I've already spoken with them, and they are going to come in.
Great.
Once we finalize the policy, there will be an implementation process that comes with it. So it goes back to within the timeline, this example of training. We will have to ensure that all the persons that we're working to readily identify within the school district actually get the new policy once it's enacted by the Board of Education. And we'll make sure we believe we know who the majority of those organizations are based upon our research with the Attorney General's office and or the IRS website. So we've been trying to do our due diligence to identify, but at the same time, we'll send this out because these also get distributed throughout the school district. So the staff members, and I'm just going to use Elliot because he's here this evening in the audience, staff members that directly affiliate through an organization. Elliot's directly involved with the Theater Boosters. He would see this as a staff member, and we would ask when we send it to staff, please make sure that this is discussed within your booster organization if you are so affiliated. And Elliot would be an example of that. Melissa's going to get it because she's also PTO. So she's getting it for theater too. So we'll send it to the masses, everyone and anyone, but we will do training to try to help organizations understand what the rules and regulations are, back to Mr. Darrow's point, to try to help them because it's very complicated. They're not our group. We're not dictating to them under the statute, but we want to support them because they do so much to support the kids.
And we know they have the best of intentions, so
Oh, absolutely.
trying to help out with that.
And along those lines, I know you mentioned some sort of an implementation schedule, but I would encourage you to give these organizations enough time to become compliant.
48 hours?
No. No.
Well,
So,
we do recognize that they could all be at a different stage.
Right.
And to be honest with you, I've had a few conversations since a recent email went out in the school district related to opportunities for improvement. And some booster organizations have contacted us asking specific questions, and we applaud them for doing that because our goal is to try to help ensure they get the right information because there's all kinds of information available. Or I heard someone say this and that's not actually true. They need to get the actual facts to understand what do they need to do to ensure that they're compliant because we don't want anyone to be at risk. That's not our intent. We want to continue to lift up and support the students, and we think these groups do wonderful work.
I agree.
You know
You
what?
can do a public
It's
participation.
right
Almost there.
right
Yes,
now.
Patrick, do we have forms?
Yeah, we're just moving into that right now.
It's next on the agenda.
And I appreciated the dramatic response from the theater boosters.
Did you see that? And they're here in mass. Did you notice? They got the whole teams here. They did a great job.
You are on top of it.
She's ready, Becky.
Yeah, we've got
He doesn't even need 48
overachievers over
hours.
here. Well, I think we're going to have at least one person who would like
Yes.
to speak to the board.
I think you're getting signed up.
Can you find the typo?
Did you like your picture?
Is there a typo?
Yeah, there's a typo.
But do I have to find it?
Can you find it?
Wait,
I'll go through it.
we're
On the
not
front
in-
page?
we're not in-
Nope, it's close to the front.
Nice.
Ah, oh, thank you.
Challenge.
Look at that.
I know.
Okay, we have 3 folks who would like to speak this evening. And the first piece of paper happens to be Melissa Gould. And Melissa, if you'll just, share your name, speak into the mic, and give us your address. And you have, I can never remember if it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and with a
5.
drama group,
It's
we
5.
better really watch it.
Melissa Gould, 5206 Hanover Close. Thank you. I just had a question on page 2, section G. The time, date, and purpose of all fundraisers shall have prior approval of the district administration. And so my concern is just, again, on behalf of the PTO from a micromanaging standpoint. Now, if we present a list of our fundraisers, what they're going to be through the year, the membership drive, the supply sale, this and this, who do we send those to? What is the window of time to have that approved, and what would the criteria be? Only again that we're moving to new ways of doing things, and most of the PTOs have a really good established way of doing things already, and we've had some issues with stuff this year, so that would be my concern. Thank you. And do I sit down now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we even need that section?
It's board policy.
We do need that section. This isn't a question answer, but I'm going to address to the board. We do need that policy because we want to be able to track what everyone's doing. And so when we're asking for financials, we can match things up. I think we'll probably put into place some district administrative guidelines that would say who to send those to, what is the time for the approval, and whether it actually comes to the board for approval, or if that's just an administrative function, which is what we intend.
That is current practice within the school district. It's in alignment with current policy. There is a fundraising protocol, may not be fully vetted or implemented or understood by all, and that can become part of the training that we can do with the organizations. But there is a fundraising process in place within the school district. So it's probably an opportunity for improvement. But we will make sure we work with the organizations. But that's not something that comes to the Board of Education in their schedule for approval. It's done administratively. So it happens with us.
Okay. Angel Onda.
Hello, my name is Angel Ondo, 5439 Bullfinch Drive, Worcesterville, Ohio. I have been the treasurer for the Theater Boosters for the last 3 years officially. My concern has always been, am I doing this right? So I appreciate you telling me that if I'm going to be doing it right, my concern is training, because I do that by profession. Are we going to have anything from the state as well? Because I've struggled over the years with, what am I supposed to fill in this box? What does it mean? What does it mean by assets? What does it mean? hope and pray. I have everything in an electronic format as it is. I don't keep pen and paper. I use Quicken, and so I can run all kinds of reports and little budget things and all that good stuff. But I don't know what I've been putting in for the last few years is correct. The state's never said anything, and the federal government seems to be fine with what I put in. But is there an opportunity? Because when I saw the word audit, because I've done that before, that made me panic, because what are you looking for from an audit perspective? If you were to ask me for something audited, what are you looking for? So that's my biggest concern, or training. Am I filling them out right? And then what sort of audit would you be describing?
So we're already bringing in the AG's office that can probably help answer some of those questions about your 990. I'm happy to contact the IRS and have them come in as well to help talk about the 990. And then in the policy that says,
On the last page. E.
with such financial statements in audited form, if so available. So we really are looking for the financial forms. If they're audited, what I would expect is more of a review. What we don't want to do is have any huge financial burdens on the organization to have to pay for an audit like the way we would be audited. So if someone's reviewing for compliance, do you have, 2 people signing your check so it's not just one person, that kind of thing? Does it look like it's filled out correctly? If you don't have that audited, we just want your financial statement.
Quicken's a wonderful thing.
I love I'm 1999 user since Quicken.
Right.
But that's the reason I ask, is because I can run, I'm meticulous when it comes to what went in, who did it, whose card was it on, what check was it for. The receipts become a challenge at times because sometimes they're electronic. They buy something online. They may have the receipts they've collected for 3 months, and then they're giving to me, and then I'm trying to say, did I have a receipt for every single possible thing? And then at work, I know that we don't look for receipts for $25 or less, but we certainly have a lot more money where I work than we do in our booster account. And then it's just, again, at the end of the day, what are we really saying we have versus, they're saying you have this. Well, in cash, I have this, but we do have a room full of props that probably wouldn't know what we paid $50 for. So do we really have the assets that they talk about? So it's just some of those concerns, and I want to make sure that we're transparent, that we are filling it out properly. You guys made this much,
Yes.
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
Swear to God.
We can help with
Right.
that. Back to
Yep.
Becky's point, we'll talk to the AG's office and we'll also contact the IRS. It'll become part of that training mechanism. But I would continue to document everything you described in Quicken because it actually is a very good program to keep track
We
of
don't
what it
want your
sounds to be.
itemized receipts.
No.
We do have to, see, in my world, I do have to have, if it's a 1 penny that you spend, I have to have the itemized receipts. So in this world, even with the budget we have, but we don't want that from you.
And that's because I try.
I'd like to
I
see,
appreciate it.
I'd like to see a capitalization schedule for all the props.
For all the props.
You better go over to this room in the back over here and I'll show you something.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you asking the questions. We don't normally answer questions right away, but
That's
these
why I
are-
directed them to you
Yeah.
as the board,
Yeah,
because I know the answers.
yes. Okay, and our last speaker this evening is Jessica Nettler-Whitehead.
Hello, my name is Jessica Nettler-Whitehead. My address is 11769 Johnstown Road, just up the road. I'm also in my 9th year of teaching science at the high school. I just wanted to talk a little bit about one of the questions that I heard you express amongst yourselves in terms of AP testing, where we have a lot of students who are signing up for the AP courses and challenging themselves, but then not taking the test. I know part of it for some families may be the fee, because there is a fee associated with that test. I'm not aware of what it is currently. I know in the past it's been $80. But that was when I was in high school, so I'm sure it's changed by this point. But one of the interesting things that students really, really enjoy and really want to challenge themselves, they want to be very, very prepared when they go out into the world. And a lot of them come back saying how prepared they felt. But a lot of colleges at this point are not taking those AP scores into consideration at all, or for what they're planning to major in. For example, I have taught physics. I have not taught the AP version, but I took AP physics in high school, and I took the AP test. And then I went on to major in physics in college. But the AP score that I got at the school that I went to would have given me credit for a course that I didn't need for my major. It would have been the basic level physics course, but as a physics major, I needed to start, here, and the test gave me credit for here, which was not really, I took the test, but it really wouldn't do anything for me. A lot of the students that are taking tests now, or have the ability to take the test, or they sign up for the courses, are not necessarily, they know the colleges that they are going to either do not accept the credit at all. So even though they score a 5 on an AP test, they may not be, their college might say, and they don't really get anything for that. They do get the experience, however, so I know our students are challenging themselves in a lot of really fantastic ways, but they're not necessarily taking that test because I asked them, oh, are you going to take the test? And they say, no, the colleges that I plan to apply to or that I have applied to won't do anything with my scores, so I'm not going to expend the money, and I'm not going to expend the intense time studying. Maybe I'll study for this AP class where I know I can get credit, but this other test, my college of choice won't take. So it's not necessarily in my best interest to do that. So I know a lot of students do take the test, and I know some of them who have, they told me I was supposed to sit for the test, so they put their name on it and walk away. And they don't fill out the test, and then our scores appear as a 0, and that's sad, because if they were required, they said, oh, it's required to take it, but then they know it has no bearing on them whatsoever, they don't take it seriously. So I know some students have made that choice, and I know there was questions amongst each other, and they're like, why wouldn't you take the test? And so, well, if you don't want the credit, or your college isn't going to take the credit, it may be in your best mental interest to then not take that test.
Thank you. That's
Thank you.
helpful background. Okay. We have one action item for this evening. And could I please have a motion to approve performance pay for Treasurer Rebecca Jenkins at the full target amount set forth in the contract for the 2015-16 school year?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. I will just speak briefly. I know that Ms. Jenkins does not really like public displays of admiration or compliments. So I will just very briefly say that the board met in executive session, and we evaluated Ms. Jenkins under the terms of her contract, where part of her performance or part of her evaluation was around the standards that the state of Ohio has set for an exemplary school treasurer. And the rest of her evaluation was whether or not she achieved certain very specific goals for the past year. And I'm really very pleased to tell you that the board was very pleased with your performance this year and felt that you were certainly very deserving and you had earned your performance bonus or performance compensation for this year. We're very, very pleased with your service and feel very fortunate to have someone of your expertise and your background and your caliber as a person and an individual working here in the district.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if anybody else would like to say anything?
I would, if I may.
Yes, sure.
I have a general comment or some general comments on performance pay. And we have made performance pay, and previous boards have made performance pay an important component of compensation for our leadership team in particular. And as I have said in every board meeting where we've had consent agenda relating to compensation, I've said that those items are generally perfunctory as they relate very specifically to very specific contract terms, and it's the contract that we are upholding. And so those consents are in fact perfunctory on the basis of a contract that has been agreed to and signed. Same thing applies here for Treasurer Jenkins. This is a contract that the previous board agreed to with the treasurer. There were objective measurements. the objectives, the measurement or the standards were achieved, and I believe there's an obligation to honor the contract. And so we are doing just that. Going forward, we will continue to follow that sort of process. I think today was an excellent example of the kind of public process that we're going through to establish these goals and objectives, and that it is critical that when we agree to those, that we then honor them, that the people that we are putting, that have the opportunity for performance pay, they can depend that when we agree on measures and they earn them and they are objective, that they are paid, and that's the process that we go through. So, I mean, that's how I look at this. I think there's both a legal and ethical obligation to honor contracts, and that the process of establishing the terms of those contracts are where the rubber really meets the road. Our job then is to execute accordingly, and the employee's job is to do the job. And so that's how I feel in this case.
Thank you.
I wanted to just say that I think your voice is a really important voice for the board to hear, for the community to hear. And I feel like you're an outstanding partner to the board and the superintendent. And, you know, as we move forward to try to achieve the best developmental and academic outcomes for each student, your voice is critical. So, you know, I just would encourage you to always say what you see. And, you know, I've always appreciated your expertise, and in particular that you always are able to take us down multiple paths and tell us what the pros and cons of each path is. And for someone who's not a finance person, you do a great job of helping me think through strategically decisions that are going to impact our students. So I just want to let you know how important your voice is in this team.
Thank you. I don't think letting you know what I think about things is a problem.
Really?
Keep doing it.
We ready to vote? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Kalinowski,
Yes.
Mr. McClellan,
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
President Kohler.
Yes, and that motion carries. And finally, we need a motion for an executive session. And the motion will be to enter into executive session as permitted by section 121.22 G, I, and 4 of the Ohio Revised Code for consideration of the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, evaluation, or compensation of a public employee, official, or student, and to prepare for, conduct, or review a collective bargaining strategy.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Barrow.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Newmoff. And could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski,
Yes.
Mr. McClellan,
Yes.
President Kohler.
Yes. So we will adjourn into executive session.
Tech room.
Oh, in the tech room. And just so everyone knows, we don't anticipate taking any action as a result of this executive session. But thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy the
Thank you.